Thank you. See you later. Now let's get more on our main news. That report into last summer's rioting, which says that many of those who took part had been failed by the education system and their parents. It's proposed schools could be fined for failing to teach pupils to read and write. We are joined in the studio to discuss the report by Amira Asantewa from the charity Youth at Risk, which works with marginalised youth. And we're also joined from Westminster by the Shadow Education Minister and MP for Tottenham, David Lammy. Thank you both very much for joining us. Amira Asantewa, first of all, what do you make of the report? It's got pretty broad areas that it's looked into, hasn't it?
I think that from the information that I've read so far, I think the issues are complex. I think the issues are all there identified. I think that it speaks to some of the things that need to be tackled, some of the issues that are not new, that have been identified by organisations, schools, politicians for a number of years, and I think it's time for us to really look at how can we address some of these issues, not tinker on the surface with them, but get underneath and start to look at what's really going on for young people. How can we really impact how they feel about society, how they feel about their communities, so that they have something at stake in society.
David Lammy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think the report is probably broadly in the right area. This can't be reduced to a soundbite. There are many issues, parenting, families, materialism, worklessness being amongst them. But I am worried that there's a lot of emphasis on young people here. Only 1 in 5 of the rioters were young. There were many adults, people into their 30s and 40s. The gentleman who burned down that wonderful shop in Croydon was well into his 30s. So, in a sense, I think we should also concentrate on the underlying cultural issues that remain in our society, the worklessness that's endemic on many of our estates, and also the challenges for people just to be family because they're not earning enough and because they can't be there in all sorts of ways. The question is, why did people feel they did not have a stake in society such that they could cause the mayhem that they did? And in a sense, I hope this is not just another report that languishes on the shelf, but one that people will genuinely respond to.
Amira Asantewa, what about just people knowing the difference between right and wrong? I mean, obviously, you know, all these issues are being looked at, but the bottom line is lots of people are growing up in the same environments and aren't going out and didn't go out and riot on the streets. I
think you're right, and I think that those young people and those people that didn't can very clearly see what's right and what's wrong. And even some of those that were involved know that actually it was wrong. I think that a number of young people and people who were involved thought, well, no one's doing anything, so actually I can get involved. There seems to be no repercussion, there seems to be no consequence. And unfortunately, when we look at how we teach and educate our young people, whether that's at home or whether that's at school, some of those things are getting lost. The boundaries are becoming blurred.
So do you think, actually, then, that the way that the courts really clamped down on this in terms of sending out a strong message in terms of the sentencing that was handed down, do you think that that might actually make a difference?
I think it is a very strong message. I'm not sure it will make a difference because ultimately we still need to work with those young people, particularly those young people who may not have been involved in crime or on the fringes of crime before. We now need to put something in place that has them begin to look at how can they reintegrate into society, how can they now see I can still be a part of this community even though I made some mistakes.
David Lammy, that statistic that has come out in this report today, about 500,000 forgotten families, do you feel that that's a sort of accurate representation, and if it is, how do you think that gets tackled?
Yes, I do. I think many of your viewers will recognise that many of our housing estates across Britain have gone from being working class housing estates to becoming workless housing estates. That's not just unique to this government. It existed under a Labour government. We often referred to NEETs, and there are now many successive generations of that workless class in our country. I don't call it a feral underclass, it's a workless class. And I think with a lack of work, that does lead to big issues around character and around your own stake in society. I think alongside that, the working poor in this country have been horribly squeezed, many people having to do 2 jobs in London just to make ends meet. That's what's led up, I think, to some of those families being troubled, hurting really because of time and because often if they aren't working, a total sense of hopelessness at the prospect of getting work.
The issues that are raised by the report are not the sort of things that are going to be sorted out quickly, are they?
No, I think it's a long-term investment. It's about working with families, with young people, with communities, with the professionals who work with these families and young people, and really beginning to invest some time and resource to really tackle those underlying issues, which, as David Lammy said, are complex and are generational. And ultimately we need to look at how can we impact them now. The work Youth at Risk does up and down the country, we see lots of different types of young people. None of the young people we work with in our programmes were involved with the riots. And we see that the kind of intervention that we have has young people see that they've got a stake in society. So some of the work has to involve working with young people around self-esteem, self-worth, taking responsibility. And that's the kind of thing that's not an overnight success. It's going to need investment in terms of people, in terms of resource, in terms of money, and actually a commitment and a willingness from professionals to work maybe differently than how we've been working so far.
Amira Asantewa and David Lammy, thank you both.
Thank you.